Hi, I'm Jennifer Gilmour, and I'm an author and advocate for women in abusive relationships. I'm also the founder of #AbuseTalk, a weekly Twitter chat, 8 till 9 p.m. GMT here on Twitter. Today I want to talk about loneliness and isolation after domestic abuse. I want to bring awareness to what it can be like with a life after an abusive relationship. I personally experienced a domestic abusive relationship quite some time ago now, but I still suffer with flashbacks, memories, and everyday life triggers. And so, in this little series that I've created, I would like to bring awareness to different aspects that I've struggled with. So, loneliness and isolation. This one happened to me quite in the beginning steps of coming out of an abusive relationship. So just to let you know that I was in predominantly coercive controlling relationship at the time. There was no UK law in place, so the support I received were from the local authority, Hull DAP, the doctors and the children's centre with a family support worker. The police were actually quite empathetic, but obviously couldn't enforce the law because there wasn't a law in place. So when I left this relationship, I actually fled across the country about 3 hours away, and I returned to my hometown of Hull in East Yorkshire. It's actually a city and one capital of culture in 2017. I'm very proud to be from Hull. And the first thing that struck me was the loneliness and isolation after abuse. Now, I didn't realise I was in an abusive relationship till 9 months after. So coming straight out of that relationship, I felt that I was quite a unique person to have experienced what I had experienced. I didn't even know what I had experienced, and I felt that I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. And so I was quite paranoid and anxious and suffered straight away with depression. And the best thing for me to do coming out of that relationship was to basically remove any links to him. So I went on social media straight away and removed any mutual friends. It didn't matter where or how I knew them. The only exception I had was family, because I knew I would be able to talk to them and explain. The reason behind that strategy and what I did was, 1, to protect myself, and 2, to reassure me so I didn't have any more anxiety over it. And the reasons why I felt like this was because just before that relationship had ended, things had started to come to light. I guess I was switching on to the abuse, even though I didn't recognise it. And I realised that he had friends and work colleagues that were working on his behalf. And when I mean that, they may not be aware of it. But one of them actually spoke to me and said they were a bit concerned, it was unusual, and this is what he'd been asked to do. And it was to report on when I'd left work and what time it was, and when I came into work and what time it was. And so I realised that I was actually being surveillanced in a way. And so coming out of that relationship, I straight away felt I needed to cut ties because I didn't know who else could be potential people to work for him. And sometimes that terminology online is called flying monkeys. So just so you're aware. So that meant that I had lost quite a lot of my friends online that I knew in person. And so already, if I wasn't feeling lonely about the situation I was going through, I felt even more lonely because I didn't really have anyone to talk about. Because then the other barrier I came across was trust. Who do I trust, having gone through this? And are they going to get in touch with him and tell him what I've said? And so it was a very complicated time. I just basically had to cut all ties. So what does that mean? And how did those people take it? Some of them still might not know the reason, and some of them might watch this video now. And what I can say to you is that I'm sorry, but I had to protect myself and make things less anxious for me. So going forwards, the first time I felt a bit more secure and a bit more understood was when I went on a recovery program and got to meet another person who had experienced what I'd gone through. And it was 9 months after then, and that was the pinnacle moment for me, that I knew I wasn't alone, and that it was actually, in fact, a common problem, an epidemic. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. This is really common, but it's not really spoken about, and that was a big struggle for me, because I needed to talk about it in a safe way. And so because of this isolation and my experiences on this recovery program, I felt I didn't want that to stop. I didn't want to stop talking to other people, other survivors who had gone through domestic abuse. And so I decided to open #AbuseTalk, which is a digital community for those with lived experiences and professionals, or those who want to support their friends. It's for anyone. And I started that purely because I just didn't want to be isolated in knowing what I'd experienced. Because I know from me that the people who understand me the most, my thought processes, sometimes the weird flashbacks, or sometimes the way I might say something that is completely different to what I'm thinking, I know that they are going to understand the people who have also gone through it. So I started #AbuseTalk, and it's every Wednesday 8 till 9 p.m. GMT on Twitter. And we just have a discussion about domestic abuse each week. Sometimes we have really challenging topics, and sometimes we have enlightening and fun topics and just social topics. And for me, that meant that my world that had become closed in really sort of went out to people joining in all over the world. So it wasn't just anybody in the UK. And so I think my message for you guys today is that when we come across people who may have experienced domestic abuse, or you might have seen traits of it and suspected it, that just be mindful that if you've been cut off, you may have been cut off for a different reason. They're protecting themselves, and they will probably come back to you at some point. It's about being mindful to that. And if anybody has any questions on this and how I've dealt with it, I'm not saying my way is the right way at all. It was just how I could deal with it personally. You can get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me here on Twitter, or contact@jennifergilmour.com. Happily talk and answer any questions about it. But the next time I do a video, I'm going to be talking about support and how people can support people that are going through or have gone through domestic abuse, because it's really important to look for this and to help. And I guess if we work together, then it becomes easier. And that leaves me to say thank you for listening, and also to leave you on my last note, which I do for every video, and that is that together we are louder.